When we build characters for our TTRPGs or D&D, we usually have a few things in mind. What is their personality? What is their backstory? Who are their enemies and allies? What are their motivations? And certainly, what are their strengths? These questions all deserve answers, but it's important that we also discuss your character's weaknesses, because for every strong, competent character, weaknesses are bound to come by because many TTRPGs are built with party synergy, so that means your character is bound to have a weakness alongside their great strengths. So, today we'll be discussing why you should build your character with clear weaknesses in mind. And note, this video will be system agnostic, so this advice can apply to any TTRPG. Whether it's dungeon delving in OSR games like Old School Essentials, epic heroic fights in D&D 5e, the mind-boggling horrors of Call of Cthulhu, or exploring the wonders of space and Traveler, all of this will apply to your next TTRPG. So first, let's ask the question of why should you care about weaknesses? So you might be thinking, why can't you just create a cool character that does badass crap, or who's someone who's super competent all the time? Well, you can, and I recommend you should. You should play characters that are optimized, that are strong, and that have good motivations. I would always argue that's important, especially if you want a long-standing campaign. You don't want a crappy character. However, all RPGs, no matter what capacity, will have your PC be bad at something, or generally not good at something. And plus, how do you have thrill and excitement about PCs having flaws, weaknesses, or stakes, which derive from their balance of both being good at some things and bad at some things? Plus, half the joy of succeeding at a role is the potentiality of failure and in part mitigating those failures. If your player character is excellent and just awesome at everything, they will curb stomp almost every single challenge and succeed at everything. And the stakes that you thought were high are pretty small in comparison when your character is just pretty much a Mary Sue or Gary Stu. So, what do weaknesses do for your TTRPG? Well, first off, flaws and weaknesses create obstacles for your players to overcome. These obstacles can, if it's a story-driven TTRPG, create a problem for your PC to deal with. An example, your character is generally fearful of strangers despite needing to take on a dangerous quest across, say, a long and dark and deep forest. So, their weakness is they're extremely fearful. The problem is that their fearful personality will make dealing with social and maybe even combat encounters difficult. And what do they need to deal with this? And this does not mean they need to completely stop being fearful. Rather, the PC just needs to find creative solutions to dealing with or avoiding their flaws. Number 2. Weaknesses make your character relatable, despite the fantasy of the world they're playing. So, obviously, a dang tiefling and a cybernetic jockey don't exist in real life, I think. But weaknesses and flaws make your PC relatable because everyone in real life has weaknesses. No one really likes playing a goody two-shoes throughout the entirety of a long-form campaign. So, these flaws allow for you to relate to your character and also for the others, whether it be an actual play or the players or the GM. It allows them to relate to your character and generally starts a good rapport, whether that character is an arse, a heroic noble, or someone who's just downright evil. Flaws allow for that relatability. And finally, flaws distinguish your character from others. A flaw, whether it is noticeable or not, distinguishes and makes your PC unique from the others at the table. Here's a good example. You're playing a clumsy angel, but are super good natured and genuinely care about the other people in their team. This is a relatable and wholesome character flaw that other player characters and GMs can latch onto for both plot reasons and for roleplay reasons. So we understand why weaknesses are important, but how do we choose a weakness? Well, I separate it into two categories: mechanical weaknesses and narrative weaknesses. Let's start off with mechanical weakness. Mechanical weaknesses are the hindrances or flaws that are baked into your character's stats or characteristics. In Dungeons & Dragons, that might be a stat that's particularly low for your player character. Maybe the Transmutation Wizard is obviously going to be crap at strength because they are a wizard. In Call of Cthulhu, that might be your lowest characteristic in the game. Maybe you're playing a chemist in a modern day Call of Cthulhu game. Likely this character will have a high education and intelligence characteristic, but low physical endurance. Likewise, they are particularly not good at fast talk or socializing and instead are very intelligent, so most mental checks are pretty good for them. In Powered by the Apocalypse games, there might be one stat having a -1 while another having a +1. An example is masks. If you're playing a delinquent, then you have a +2 superior label while a -1 savior label. These issues are all baked into the character's stats and take an active role in affecting the character's roles and chances of success within your TTRPG, and allow for awesome roleplay. Because it makes sense that your wizard isn't going to be very good at bonking someone ahead of their fist, and likewise the chemist isn't going to be very good at fighting physically themselves. Whereas narrative weaknesses are ones that do not inherently affect or have anything to do with stats, but are part of your character's personality. For instance, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has a flaws page while in the PHB. As stated, your character's flaw represents some vice, compulsion, fear, or weakness. In particular, anything that someone else could exploit to bring you to ruin or cause you to act against your best interest. And there's nothing limiting you to whatever flaw you want to choose. Flaws can be small or big, they can be grand or minor, it doesn't matter. You can use several generators that are available on the internet or if you're a unique TTRPG book. And there are plenty of supplements available for finding flaws to your character. And finally, you can definitely combine both your personal narrative-driven flaws with your mechanical flaws in sync with each other. They don't need to be exactly separate. For some systems, your personality or flaws from your past do affect your roles, in-game currency, and game mechanics. A great example is the morality system in Star Wars' Force and Destiny. This affects in-game currency and subsequently what skills and abilities Force-sensitive characters can use. For instance, if you have emotional strength of bravery and the emotional weakness of anger, then this will affect how your character reacts when their morality decreases to the point where they are essentially a dark side user. Likewise, if they are a light side user, it'll affect the kind of in-game currency that they can have access to as well as skills. So your flaws and personality traits can be very vital and important to roleplay, so it's really a good idea to look at this before you dive into your next character. In conclusion, your character's weaknesses allow them to be more well-rounded, and when your PC fails, it could be an opportunity for growth. You should ask your GM too about ways you can make this happen, and this is especially the case if it's a character-driven TTRPG rather than, say, a dungeon delving game or a non-story focused TTRPG. Also, be sure to consult what kind of weaknesses you want in your game, because there might be some flaws or weaknesses that can be really heavy-handed and quite frankly uncomfortable or unnerving for some characters. For instance, a player character whose flaw is related to being publicly lewd or even being a stalker can go into very dangerous territory for folks who have dealt with that kind of stuff, such as women or folks who have dealt with being stalked before. So be sure to discuss at your session 0 with your fellow players and GMs what your flaws will be and the impact you want them to have in your TTRPG and specifically your character. Because like in real life, having weaknesses does not make you incompetent. Flaws make us well-rounded individuals who are seeking to improve ourselves and those around us. So why not lean into creating a character that has fleshed out weaknesses? Those flaws even can include arrogance and egoism, which I do discuss in this video over here. So if you want to learn more about the egoist personality, then check out this video. And as always, I'm your average everyday queer host, Blurty Disposition. Hope you all have an awesome day. Ciao!